So it's 1974, autumn. Chris and I moved down to New York City, and David Byrne is already there. We're going to become the Talking Heads, but we don't know that yet. We all get jobs, we find a loft, we move in together, and they would go out every night to CBGB's to look for a bass player. They looked and looked and looked. Maybe they were too clean-cut looking. Something just didn't jibe right. Chris persuaded me that I was the only person who understood them as musicians. I finally, on my 24th birthday, brought home a Leo Fender 1963 Precision bass. David was so surprised. I turned on my amplifier. Chris said, "Come on, play." So I just did boom. And he said, "Yeah! Now we're cooking with gas."
Well, my young friends, I like to think of the orchestra divided into families. The violins, the violas, the cellos, and the basses.
Yeah, boy! Bass! How low can you go?
This isn't a history of bass or a list of great players. It's a joyride through the deepest register in music. The story of how an instrument came out of the shadows to fight for the spotlight, make its own culture, and become a genre of music in its own right.
That's it. These little licks that you get, they can influence a generation.
You hear that and you know exactly where you are.
In certain cases, it can be the absolute hook of a song.
It's the melody within itself.
James Brown said, "Do what you want to do and come back to that one. You'll make me happy." And I'm glad I thought of it.
In my world, bass isn't just a sound. It's not just a frequency. It's culture.
For my generation, it's the dirty bass, and the kids really respond to it. You just need bass. It's like a conversation with no conclusion. It's like, yeah, you got a melody, you got some drums, but what's your point?
At the start of rock and roll, the bass instrument was one of these. But it was huge and it was expensive. A double bass like this would have cost thousands. From the beginning, double bass was a bit specialized, the preserve of orchestras and jazz, with its trademark walking bass lines.
You know, walking.
The walking bass line came out of blues and jazz. And really, it became super popular in America when boogie woogie sort of took over.
He puts the boys to sleep boogie every night and wakes them up to swim with the early fright.
Boogie woogie was a huge fad in the 1940s. And if you listen to Heartbreak Hotel by Elvis, you hear Bill Black playing in a plucked style, and it's slower, but he's still playing those same boogie lines, you know, when they go, "Since my baby left me, I found a new place to dwell."
Well, it's down at the end of Lonely Street at Heartbreak Hotel. I'll make you so lonely, baby. Well, I'm so lonely. I'll be so lonely I could die.
But plucked or bowed bass lines weren't the only way of playing this beautiful instrument. Blues legends like Willie Dixon began manhandling the double bass and pushing it to its limits. And hillbilly bands slapped the bass to compensate for having no drummer.
Johnny Cash and the Tennessee Two.
All of a sudden, you've got these bands like Johnny Cash and the Tennessee Two. It's just three guys. Everybody has to make the maximum amount of noise that they can possibly make just to fill out the sound.
Hey, get rhythm. When you get to blues, come on, get rhythm. When you get to blues, get a rock and roll feeling in your bones. Put taps on your toes and get gone, get rhythm. When you get to blues.
But back then, if you didn't have a double bass, there was another technique. Street corner doo-wop gave rock and roll the human bass line. Such a great track. It reminds me of my childhood. To this day, a deep, profundo basso male voice is exciting to me as a woman. I suppose because it vibrates me in all the right places. So beautiful.
The Marcells were basically a street group. They were in Pittsburgh, and they kept needling me. They kept calling me. But I said, you know what, guys, if you get to New York on your own nickel, I said, I'll record you. And I figured they'll never do it.
Wind, snow, and icy cold as the Atlantic coast experienced a true blizzard.
And of course, on some snowy January day, 5 Marcells and the manager walked from Penn Station all the way up to 711 Fifth Avenue in a blizzard.
Matter of fact, I think that was one of the coldest years maybe in history.
To come to my office and say, here we are with the Marcells. We recorded 3 songs, but in those days, when you went into a studio, you had to come out with 4 songs.
The band had a song in mind they wanted to cover. But the only part of it that Stu liked was the opening bass line.
I said, okay, supposing we start with that. Kept thinking, and I said, okay, anybody know Blue Moon? And the lead singer says, yes, I do. And at about midnight, we had 7 or 8 minutes to do Blue Moon. I said, okay, drummer, beat it off.
Bomb, 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 dang, 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 ding it all, ding, blue moon, 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 blue moon, dip, 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 moon, 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 blue moon, dang, 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 ding it all, that, the bass riffs and all that. I did that.
Bomb, 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 dang, 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 ding it on, ding, blue moon.
After I finished recording and listening to playbacks, the promotion man showed up and got floored when he heard Blue Moon. He convinced the engineer to make him an acetate.
Everything is swinging.
There was a station up there, if I'm correct, it's called WINS.
WINS. Broadcasting for New York. Good night.
Murray Decay Kaufman, he played it 26 times in one day.
Hey, babe, this is it.
Every time he went to a news break, he would play the beginning of the record, bomb, ba, bomb.
We want to tell you to stand by.
And then during the course of the hour, he'd play the whole record.
Within a week, it went to #1, and it stayed on there for about a month.
The bass line and the flavor of doo-wop, it became one of the first times that it crossed over into white radio broadcasting.
Blue Moon sparked a bass vocal craze. But there was a much bigger revolution happening in the world of bass. Such a great little bass guitar. I mean, these things you can lift with one finger, and that's a dream. The early 60s saw the rise of the electric bass guitar, a user-friendly instrument that brought bass playing to the masses and inspired a whole new beat group generation. This thing of beauty is a Hofner club bass. It's one of the first electric basses of the 1960s, It had a short scale neck. It was very lightweight. And of course, it put a lot of string bass players out of work in the early 60s. I used it in 1981 on the Genius of Love track. However, the first person I ever saw play a Hofner bass guitar was Paul McCartney. His was a violin shape, and it had a big, fat bottom sound.
McCartney was the first frontman bassist. As McCartney said before that, it was always the fat guy in the back.
Got a good reason for taking the easy way out. Got a good reason for taking the easy way out now. She was a day tripper.
Most bass players in general don't sing. So for Paul to actually play an incredibly busy bass line like that and then sing over the top of it as well, it's amazing. It was unheard of.
1, 2, 3, 4.
It's not your standard basic rock and roll bass line that you would. It's flicking back and forth on notes. So, you know, it's playing the root note, but then rather than just playing a straight sort of, it's back and forth. He was thinking of this bass line to really push the song along.
It's the drums and it's that bass. That bass is getting you to the finish line.
But while McCartney created extraordinary bass lines, Paul's Hofner did have certain quirks of its own.
You could try to play a G up the top of the neck and it would sound out of tune. And also, you can't really be flamboyant on it because you can't hold notes. So Paul received a Rickenbacker around about sort of 64, 65. It stays in tune all the way up the fretboard, which enabled Paul to not have to play bass lines down the bottom. He could come up the top and it could be a little bit more elaborate up the top of the guitar. And also, a note on a Rickenbacker will sustain. That note does ring quite considerably longer than what would occur on the Hofner. You know, the Hofner is very sort of abrupt.
But with the new bass came a challenge. For years, Paul had wanted a bigger bass sound, the kind he was hearing on American soul records. So in '66, he worked with 19-year-old engineer Jeff Emmerich to find a new way of recording his bass, to do justice to that Rickenbacker tone. Jeff had this idea, taking a secondary speaker, reversing the wiring, making a giant microphone, so that instead of pushing the air out, it was absorbing the air in, as a microphone diaphragm should do. And so he put that giant microphone right over top of Paul's speaker, so that big, woomy bass sound, that's what you hear on Paperback Writer, Rain, and Taxman. It's ingenious.
Let me tell you how it will be.
There was nothing that sounded remotely like McCartney's bass in rock.
They no longer sound like this muddy kind of business in the background. They become more melodic. So he was kind of almost playing lead guitar lines on the bass.
If you listen to a song like Something, that bass line is a whole other melody under that song. You can sing that bass line.
It was like Mozart. Meanwhile, in one of the most industrialized cities in America. Unknown to the world, one man was quietly crafting a bass sound that would outlive all of Detroit's production lines. When I was just starting, I was playing maybe 5, 6 months. I didn't know who the great bass players were because nobody put their names on the records. But one kid came up to me at CBGB's and he knew. He said, "Hey, you know the way you use your thumb and forefinger? That's just like James Jamerson." I said, "Who?" Jamerson, who played on the majority of early Motown records, was key to their unique sound. But like all of their studio players, he remained uncredited and invisible.
James Jamerson created a groove which the rest of the musicians rode on. He was the foundation, and other players vibrated with. Everyone else made up their parts based on what James was doing.
I guess you said what can make me feel this way, my girl.
They incorporate the rhythm with the melodic part as well. He could have just gone dun. He could just play the dun, 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 dun. But he chose to do something that you feel the rhythm in it as well. He brought like the two elements together.
Jamerson's bass with big flat wound strings, and there was a foam mute installed in Fenders at the time that would mute the strings. They don't make them like that anymore, so now you can just stick a piece of air conditioning foam in to get that muted, muffled sound. And then the key to the sound is never touching it beyond that. I bought this years ago, and I haven't cleaned it or done anything, because you just let it ferment.
For once in my life, I have someone who needs me, someone I've needed so long.
But he didn't change his bass strings. And so they got that little muddy, muffled sound. And so the notes didn't last long. Because the notes didn't last long, it forced him to play more of a rhythmic feel to the bass. His bass playing got then he just found in between the grooves and just started a style that nobody had ever done before.
Oh, someone warm like you would make my dream come true. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What makes a hit record a hit? It feels good. He just made those feel good, you know, the way he's playing. A little short guy, the bass was bigger than him, you know. It's unbelievable. Just a touch is what made it so special.
I Was Made to Love Her, you know, that initial sweep. You have to play really fast. Ain't No Mountain High Enough. His lines are taking these peaks and valleys. I did a bass line thing online so you can see it.
Listen, baby, ain't no mountain high, ain't no valley low, ain't no river wide enough, baby.
This was the advent of soul music, and Motown was soul music.
Don't worry, baby.
It had to be almost orchestral, but using rock instruments. He climbs when the other instruments are diving, and then he completely descends and drops under the vocal.
The first song we sent to Motown was Ain't No Mountain High Enough. We just knew it was a hit. You know, the song had so many levels.
I made a vow, I'll be there when you want me some way, somehow. Oh, baby, there ain't no mountain high enough.
James Jamerson was a quiet genius. You didn't have to tell him anything. He instantly knew the feeling that you were going after.
We've got to find a way to bring some understanding here today. Pick it
Jamerson didn't just come to define the Motown sound. He kind of invented funk bass. But because he was anonymous, he was replaceable. As Motown producers looked elsewhere and began hiring LA studio musicians.
One sad day in 1972, there was a little handwritten note on the door with a piece of tape, and it said, "No work today." And they never came back. Berry Gordy did not even tell them he was leaving Detroit. He just left.
But in the end, the loss of James wouldn't hurt Motown, as they moved to a city with its own music scene, which in the 60s had many answers to the British invasion and another extraordinary, invisible player. LA had their own studio musicians, including the woman who wrote the book on how to play electric bass guitar. Carol Kay is an inspiration to me. A woman in a man's world whose influence grew as pop grew. And one of her most famous tracks could almost be an ironic comment on what she brought to a recording session.
I played the opening lick all by myself. And then as soon as we got, Carol Kay came in on that part too. So we had the click, you know, the click on the, she played with the pick, you know. So we played together.
You keep saying you got something for me. Something you call love, but confess.
One of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you.
You've been a messin' where you shouldn't have been a messin'.
A woman's come back to somebody that's treating them poorly.
I had to be strong and tough like the guys.
These boots are made for walking.
You know, I borrowed the way that they would walk and talk sometimes.
One of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you.
With a couple of the guys who swore, then I'd swore back at them and cuss them or something. I'm not proud of myself to do that, but sometimes you gotta do that because that's the only language they understand.
You keep lying when you ought to be truthing.
She could play. She had some real, whatever, I don't want to use bad language, but she had those, you know.
Say it, John.
She had balls, you know.
Carol was inspiring to everyone, not just to women. She was just a really gutsy person. Her passion is there. You hear it. You hear it on Pet Sounds. You hear it on Smile. Wichita Lineman. River Deep Mountain High. Over 10,000 sessions. You can almost name it, and she played on it. Made me feel very supported that somebody could be that competent and that respected. Therefore, it wasn't a field that women really were not allowed to enter into.
I think that's her as well, and the beat goes on. Originally, it was just a simple line going back and forth or something, and she was like, you know, that's, you know, it needs to do something. And that became the song, you know. Sonny, and the beat goes on. I don't know if it's the right key. And the beat goes on. And that's all it is.
Drums keep pounding a rhythm to the brain.
And Carol developed a way of playing the electric bass that became her unique trademark and the hook of multiple hits.
On the Fender bass, and I played it with the pick, I could create lines with it, that made the music pop a little bit better.
Boys keep chasing girls to get a kiss.
It has not only a bright, tight sound, but it also it cuts through the track, and it's very, very accurate.
The spirit of it was how to create a hit record with a simple little line. See, that was the challenge.
And the beat goes on. The beat goes on. Drums keep pounding a rhythm to the brain. La-di-da-di-dee. La-di-da-di-da. And the beat goes on. Yes, the beat goes
While Carol was underpinning classic pop, a whole new tradition of British rock brought bass to the fore. Using the skills of British jazz players like Jack Bruce. While Jack took the spotlight with Cream, another British jazzer would take a side path to bass immortality.
Yeah, I played on some of Henry Mancini's recordings that he did in London. Us double bass players were still doing pit work like Hello Dolly, Sweet Charity, West Side Story, Kismet, Oliver. And then at 10 o'clock at night, you might go to Daniel Rue's club, the Gargoyle Club, or the Dorchester and play jazzy stuff till 4 in the morning. That's how crazy it was. Us old jazzers had the good fortune of taking our experience of improvising into the pop world. I worked for David on things like Space Oddity.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Lou Reed came over from America and David suggested to him that he'd do some recording in London. We spent 3 days laying 12 tracks. And you got paid £12 for the recording session. No more, because you were paid to go there. They were paying for your bass playing. Nothing to do with the composition of songs like Walk on a Wild Side. You get paid a wage, a workman. We all sat round in a circle. There's me here, there's Mick Ronson there on acoustic guitar, and there's Lou there with acoustic guitar and microphone. And Mick Ronson said, it's a bar of C. A bar of F. Yeah, then what? Oh, that round and round. How long for? It's just, I don't know yet. So I went. After we listened back to it, it was so raw and empty, it went through my mind, wouldn't it be nice to try another line on the bass, but a tenth apart, like that's up here, so that the two, they call it portamento, one going down and the other going up.
Holly came from Miami, FLA. Hitchhiked her way across USA. Plucked her eyebrows on the way. Shaved her legs and then he was a she. She says, hey babe,
take a walk on the wild side.
It didn't fill the track up too much. It filled it up enough to be different. Just like that bouncing ball, you know. And Lou said, that's gorgeous. And it's melancholy as well as being happy. It's got all the emotions in it. It's like a symphony. It just fitted the moment. And that's why I'm quite proud of it.
Herbie's bass line was the feature of that record. And while he got no composing royalties, unlike James and Carol, he did get a credit. And in the 70s, technology also gave bass a big boost. Musicians were using bass like never before. The equipment was a factor, with big speakers that could handle low frequencies. Now, bass could push the air ahead to propel sound forward to reach large audiences. And one guy who pioneered big bass sounds and found fame with James Brown is my good friend, Bootsy Collins.
Hello.
Oh, there you are. Oh, how you doing, Tina?
Oh, I am so happy to be with you this afternoon, Bootsy.
It's been too long, actually.
It seems just like yesterday that my mother was coming over to me and saying, Tina, there's somebody out in the audience. His name is Tootsie. He's very tall, and he's dressed entirely in green leather. Do you know someone named Tootsie? I said, no, but it may be Bootsy.
You know it, you know it.
I'm ready to get up and do my thing.
How did James Brown find you?
He was always recording here in Cincinnati, in my hometown. Bobby Bird called me and said, James Brown needs y'all to come and perform.
Oh, okay.
Tonight.
Tonight?
He came along with James Brown's Learjet to pick us up.
I don't care about your past.
First of all, he told me, you can't be on my stage with that green $29 bass you got. And then he said, what kind you want, son? What kind of bass you want? I said, well, the Fender Jazz bass is what's happening now. You know, I would love to have a Fender Jazz. And so the next day I had a Fender Jazz bass.
Beautiful.
And it seemed like every little thing I would kind of ask for. He asked me about the Ampeg amps, and I was like, I want the SVT.
Exactly.
You know, I said, not one, but two of them.
Two, yes.
Yeah. My vision was, I want one on one side of the stage so, you know, I can hear, and then the other one on the other side of the stage so they can hear on that side.
No, we need it so power. We got to have it so power.
Tell us, how did you get into doing Sex Machine?
What happened was after the show we did, I think we were in Nashville. Him and Bobby Bird is sitting in front of Catfish and myself. And he pulls out a paper bag. And then he tells Bobby Bird, yeah, I got a hit. I got a hit. It's called Sex Machine. Yeah. And then he started writing the lyric. Get up. And he said, you say, get on up. So he was teaching Bobby the lyrics. And he was telling us we got to get the groove to go with it. So by the time we got to the studio, we kind of basically had a vibe, and we went in the studio. James said, can I count it off? We said, yeah.
Can I count it off? Count it off. 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 1, 2, 3, 4. Get up.
My understanding is that you guys jammed your own parts. You improvised, you came up with the part, and then James would say, yeah.
He would say, I'm glad I thought of it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
I like that. That's a good groove. Yeah, that's a James Brown groove.
Well, in his mind, that beat is his.
Yeah.
That's James Brown music. You know, that ain't Bootsy.
Yeah.
That's the way he looked at everything.
I've been in that situation.
Yeah.
We sit around, everybody comes up with a part, and we're just cooking along.
Yeah.
And then the lead cat says, yeah, and pretty soon I wrote a song.
Well, that's exactly what happened.
Get up, take him to the bridge. Take him to the bridge. Take him on.
I love what you're doing. I'm glad I thought of it. But just lay it back, lay it back. Good God. 1, 2, 3, and you hit on the 1.
Explain for folks who don't come from the mothership what down on the 1 is.
Oh, man. He would always tell me he loved all the stuff that I played, but I just needed to add the 1.
And then you would try to fit your different notes, what you felt in between that, like, you know, and that's the funk. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, you know? 4, 1.
He said, as long as you do what you want to do and come back to that 1, you'll make me happy. And I'm glad I thought of it. You know?
In the early 80s, while recording Tom Tom Club at Compass Point in the Bahamas, we had the intense pleasure of hanging out with another great player, Robbie Shakespeare, bass half of Sly and Robbie, who was there working with Grace Jones.
This is a track by the Compass Point All-Stars called Peanut Butter. When Grace Jones sings over it, then it becomes Pull Up to the Bumper. And it's great for demonstrating what Robbie Shakespeare can do on bass. It's just such a brilliant piece of work because it's all on 1 string. Keeps it nice and heavy and deep, but it's rolling all the time. It's driving the track forward, it's moving, and it's so cool to dance to.
Robbie, feet rooted to the ground like a samurai, is one of the first generation of reggae bassmen and was a key player in the 70s sound systems that came to the UK from Jamaica. A scene where bass took on a bigger role than it ever had before, where it became part of a cultural identity.
For those that don't know, a sound system is like a giant mobile disco that's all about the bass, with bass cabinets that are like 6 feet high. I mean, my father had a sound system. It was called Duke Lex Supersonic Sound. At any given time in Brixton or Notting Hill, you'd find what you called a shebeen, these basement clubs. Tiny rooms filled with speakers, more speakers than people. Earth-shattering frequencies. You know, you'd be making a spliff in front of these things and the bass would blow the spliff out your hand. In fact, a lot of times you'd find them, you'd drive around at night time, 1 o'clock in the morning, and you'd listen out for bass.
You end up with sound systems competing for crowds. And for that, sound systems would find engineers that would be able to cut them one off dub plates, individual exclusive records, pushing the bass as far as possible. There was one that out in the suburbs, and it's a beautiful setup. This couple in their mid to late 60s, and these guys from a local London sound system rock up, feeling slightly out of place.
Sending to outer space to find another race.
If there wasn't enough bass, you could boost that to transform your mix and give it power, and then the dub plate would be cut.
Undoubtedly, when these things were mastered, you're maxing out the bass, and then you're playing on a sound system through valve amps that are going to max it out. You know, so at night it's like lightning and thunder. You know, in my world, bass is a culture. You know, I travel around the planet and it connects me to X amount of people. To put it into words as to what exactly that is, very difficult, but it's definitely an attitude. It's definitely a school of thought. It's definitely a way that you carry yourself on a day-to-day basis. It's not just about the frequency.
So here we are just coming into downtown Manhattan. Are we on Delancey? Yes, we're on Delancey. Well, in some ways, it's the same as it ever was. But in some ways, it's changed radically. It's very much gentrified. I can't see which one is our door anymore. It's so changed. I'll figure it out by the actual address, right? That way was the way to CBGB's. This was where I parked my car. We were on the top floor. Just below us was a blacksmith, so it was sweltering in summer, but it was a godsend in winter because that was all we had, was the heat that percolated up through the concrete floors. We wrote our first 2 albums in here. When we lived here, the kids adored coming out here, hanging out on the street, and they'd have their boom boxes, they'd bring their pieces of cardboard, they were spinning on their heads, doing all kinds of b-boy dance, hip-hop tricks. And that was when New York City was really starting to get cool. In the late 1970s, I bought my first boombox. It was a Sony. And the most important part, it had bass, it had big bottom, and that was everything we were looking for. We could listen to dance music. It was like you had your own private, personal club.
In 1979, the summer I got that boombox, all music styles blossomed. Bass-heavy disco was huge. And there was one group who supercharged it and laid a foundation for hip-hop with the perfect bassline breakdown.
3 on E. Everybody knows about 3 on E, right? I mean, Another One Bites the Dust, Hollywood Swingin'. Like, if you want to get people moving, just take the lowest string and hit it 3 times.
Good Times was maybe our greatest bass line. For many years, we had been trying to put walking bass lines in songs. And I guess that's probably because of my jazz background. This particular day, Bernard came to the studio late, and he says, our engineer at the time, he said, hey man, what's going on? What's that? And he said, I don't know, that's something Niall came up with last night or this morning or something. I don't know, but all the guys are playing it. So Bernard just plugged in and he was copying me. So I was playing. So he was probably going. That sounded okay. But then I just screamed, walk, walk, walk. And for no reason other than the fact that we had been trying it 1,000,000 times. And he went, doom, doom, doom. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. And it just felt amazing to us. And I screamed to the engineer, make it red. And we just recorded it, first take, and it was right.
With Bernard Edwards, he claimed he could never hold on to a pick. But he would play like he had a pick in his hands. And you get this bizarre sound of when you're going down, it hits the fingernail. And when you're going up, it hits the pad of the finger.
His whole chucking thing, it's really hard to play. Let me see. Play it again. Ah. Something like that. I'll try it again. That was not bad. So it's a mixture of using the finger as a pick and using regular traditional bass fingering at the same time.
And that used to always amaze me and amaze other bass players because they thought he had a pick, but that was his technique.
Which I haven't seen anyone even do to this day.
And it was so complicated, I just decided to go.
But Chic's bass-heavy breakdowns weren't just innovative. They were key to their success and their legacy.
It worked with every crowd, with the newly growing hip-hop crowd, because we had amazing breakdowns. It worked with the super funkers, because our music was always different, jazzy bass lines. All of our hit records had that melodic bass breakdown. That was the Chic magic. So we wrote up on the wall, and we kept this motto for all time. A song is an excuse to go to a chorus, and a chorus is an excuse to go to the breakdown. Period. That's our philosophy.
Let's go! Let's go! Let's go! The moment in a straight line. You're going through a tight one.
We're standing here in front of CBGB's. Well, used to be. Now, it's a men's clothing shop. I saw some great bands here in my day. There was Television, then there was Patti Smith, then there was Blondie, and the Ramones. Oh my goodness, it was an amazing time. One of the most liberating things was for people who played bass was they could move around because the parts were very simple. They could just go down, 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 down. Or feet firmly planted to play bass like this, which was a very different style from the funk and jazz players who played up here like this. The great thing about punk was it liberated us.
Let's go!
We all felt we could do anything.
Let's go!
And at the end of the 70s, in a parallel punk city, one band took that spirit and redefined the role of the bass as lead guitar.
When I started playing at 21, it was actually more important for me not to play like anybody else, because punk was looked on as the revolution. I do remember going into music shops, which was our big Saturday regime, and listening to all these tossers playing Stairway to Heaven and, you know, Smoke on the Water and all that lot. Our attitude was that we had to stay away from that. My style came quite naturally from being unable to hear myself in the rehearsal room. I started playing high. And the singer loved it. Ian Curtis, God rest his soul. Play like that. Play high. Play high. It's nice that I have a different style, and I must admit that it sort of fits in with my ego because I'm not good at standing at the back. Love Will Tear Us Apart. The song came from the bass. It took us about 3 hours. We had the bass line. Got the break. And then the end. about an hour. And then Ian loved it. He said, I'm going to rip your riff off. I'm going to get some vocals that go with that riff. And he did. It became part of our persona as a group. I would play around the vocal, but a different melody. To me, that gave a depth to the songs.
As the band morphed into New Order in the 80s synth boom, Hooky and his bass found they had competition.
They always say that drum machines and bass synths were invented so that the lead singer doesn't have to talk to the bass player or the drummer. All of a sudden, you've sort of lost your role in the group and you're fighting with a sequencer that is taking your role.
Kicking off with New Order, playing live, singing live with Blue Monday.
Drum machines and synth bass drove the band's seminal hit. But Hooky still found a way to steal the day.
And that's the famous line of Blue Monday that I stole from Ennio Morricone. In the studio, we were watching for a few dollars more, and I thought, I wonder if that'd work. Went in and got it. He says that. That's Ennio. Don't tell him.
Very careless of you, old man.
What we have here is the Moog Rogue that I took on tour with Talking Heads. We could think about bass in a new way and play bass in a different way and play parts that we wouldn't have thought to play before. Because when you're playing on a neck, you're thinking of one kind of part because of the physical dexterity of it. I found this a really useful tool. Not only that, but it's funky. And you can change the sound. If I pitch it down, it's fun. The equipment really changed how the artists thought about what they could do.
That's me going,
And one of the favorite tools 90s house producers used to get really deep bass sounds was the low-frequency oscillator, otherwise known as the LFO. And these subsonic breakdowns became a genre in themselves, as drum and bass clubbers craved these low frequencies.
During the 90s, I started to develop bass sounds that had a wobble effect. People always took it as my signature and they credited me with the wobble bass sound.
And Aphrodite wasn't using synths or expensive gear. As one of the first bedroom producers, he made deeper bass sounds with just a home computer and budget software.
This was the kit. This is the Commodore Amiga. In there, you have everything. You have a sequencer that allows you to write notes as if they were on a stave. These rows are white notes from a keyboard. These rows are black notes from a keyboard. You literally figured it in your head and then programmed it straight in. And then, in order to get it going down, you put a pitch control in Octamed, which was a piece of software I bought for £1 back in 1989. If you take that digital output and put that to a big rig, it is as low as possible that a bass can go. On a track like Drop Top Caddy, which is myself and Mickey thing, we had this bass line that I created here, down. With the hit, you're taking the frequency down incredibly low, and that's what gets you in the stomach.
Yeah! Yeah! Bitch, what you doing? What? Who touched it? Who told you to touch it? Don't ever touch that shit again! I'm a fiend for a big dirty bass line. When I hear one, I have a great time.
By the millennium, bass had gone from the shy passenger at the back to a new generation's addiction.
Take my bass away.
A frequency they didn't just want to hear,
Over the top. But when I hear that bass line drop,
but wanted to feel.
I still feel satisfaction. So don't come around here whinging. I just want to hear the bass line rinsing.
Bass means everything to me. I've made songs about bass, bassline junkie.
I don't need no speed. I don't need no heroin.
That's the song basically what I'm saying. I'd rather have bass than drugs.
I'm a bassline junkie. I'm a bassline junkie. And I like it funky. Big, dirty, stinking bass.
I had an Audi RS5 and I got a subwoofer put in it that was half the size of the boot. I always wonder, why is everyone always looking at me? Like, they could hear me from down there.
Bass, 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 bass.
The ladies like bass as well. Their hair standing up. No, I've heard like the girls, it gets the girls. I mean, that's why you get the girls, sometimes they stand right next to the speaker. They like to feel it through them, going through them, innit?
My name's Dizzy Ross. When it's about time we got a little bit bonkers.
And Dizzy would have his biggest hit when house-come pop producer Armand van Helden sent him a track with a bass drop that crossed all genres.
Let's do this. Check it, come on.
I heard it on the laptop speaker. And that's why that's dangerous, because sometimes you don't take... There's music I dismiss because of the way I listen to it. I think I even sat on it for 6 months or something. I had to tell me, like, you might want this for your album. I said, yeah? Like, I'd forgotten about it.
I wake up every day, it's a daydream. Everything in my life ain't what it seems. I wake up just to go back to sleep. I got no shadow, but I'm in too deep.
I performed it for the first time in Liverpool. The reaction was mental. It was like it was a hit already, and I couldn't believe it. I think we did it twice. Like, the crowd, they went mad, and I didn't even realise the hit I had. And it's that drop.
Come on.
When that bass line drops, every country I go to, anywhere, they go mad. And it's been like that, 10 years? Mental. The purpose of bass is like the glue. Yeah, that's what the bass is. The bass is like the glue.
It's powerful, it's emotional, it's gutsy, it comes from deep down.
Take it out!
Bass has been central to my life. I've seen bass grow, I've seen it flourish, and maybe now more than ever, it's center stage. It ain't just the big fat guy at the back.